Good afternoon all. Am I audible? Will anyone respond in the chat?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Right. As it was a advanced Java programming session, let me clarify your doubt first. One is, till now Rajesh sir continued the subject. I think presently Rajesh sir sharing the beans topic right now, and I'm also one of the faculty for advanced Java programming, and now I started the sessions, right? So me and Rajesh sir will share these AJP sessions. Few units will be handled by Rajesh sir, and a few units will be handled by me, right? And now today I'm starting the session, and very good to see you, and hope everyone is safe and doing good with their families, right? Let me know before starting my session. Just I want to know from last I think 1 month we were having these AJP sessions every day almost, except 1 or 2 days, few days. Right. May I know the contents you learned as part of this course. You can type in the chat the topics, titles, whatever you learn as part of AJP. You can type in the chat. Maybe you're thinking, if you say one topic name, I'm going to ask some question. No, I'm not going to ask questions. Right? I would like to know just whatever the topics you learned or you heard at least so far. Serialization, very good. Next. Vidyamani, serialization, good. Serialize others. Collections, very good. Java frames, good. Swings and serialization, good, very good. HTML, introduction to HTML, very good. I think very recently you had a discussion related to beans also, right? Beans are already started. Comparable interface, Rina. Maybe typo mistake, typo error. It's comparable, right? Yes, comparable interface. Very good. That's a nice to hear from everyone. Vanilla comparator interface. Good. Yes. At a glance, just I will revise the topics. Whatever. I'm not going to touch the detailed information about the covered topics, right? Just I will take just a couple of minutes to talk with them. Shallow and deep copying, very good. Manideep. Right. Just I will take a couple of minutes. As a part of first unit, majorly we will learn about the basic concepts for Java, like system class, right? Shallow and deep copying, and applets, right? Signed applets especially, and I think a collection framework majorly, right? That's going to be very important topic. And swings, I think, and an introduction to HTML, right? So these were the things generally we will focus majorly as part of Unit 1. And then we will have only one topic, that was beans, exclusively beans, as a second unit. That was already started a couple of days back. I'm not going to continue that. Later, Sir will continue, take the classes, and will finish, conclude that beans topic. Right? I'm going to work with a fresh topic, and don't mind that. In between, I'm starting a new topic here because Sir is engaged with mock interviews of TCS Code Editor, right, for your final year students. That's why, without wasting the classes, right? So I'm started these sessions. Actual plan was after completion of the beans, I have to start, but due to sudden plans, right? So I need to start in the middle. But anyway, we'll have the beans topic later. So Rajesh sir will conclude that. I'm going to handle the third unit here, right? Actually, the topic is servlets. In a single line, it was servlets. Right. Maybe it was a completely new to us, the terminology servlets, why we need servlets, right? How we will work with the servlets technology and all these things, right? Servlets is also a Java. Servlets are also Java, right? Right. Why we need them, right? So generally, whenever we are working with when we were designing the web applications, right, we need the servlets. At a single line, this is the requirement where we need the servlets. When you are working with the web applications to respond with dynamic web page at the server end, we need the servlets. That's a single line statement. That was okay. But to understand, it's clearly we need some prerequisition topics. Maybe we know them, but definitely we have to learn once again, right? Or we have to revise them once again, right? To continue with my topic, right? The introduction part, you can take it as a servlets, introduction to servlets here, right? Yes, give me a minute so that I can share my screen here. Well, I think my screen is visible to you, clear to you, right? Right. So as part of this session, right, what we are going to see here, these are the things we are going to see as part of our introduction, right? So what is a web, and what do you mean by static and dynamic web pages? What is HTTP, and a bit introduction to servlets, and a bit introduction to CGI technology, and a small comparison between servlets and CGI, and if it is possible, right, Tomcat introduction, right? So let's see one by one here. So look at this diagrammatic diagram, right? Almost every computer or every laptop or tab is connected to other computers in the world through a net, and we call it as a web. All the connected devices, if you consider these connected computers or laptops or whatever it may be, the devices, right? Among them, few will be the clients and few will be the servers. So what is meant by client device here, or what is meant by server device here, or simply client and server, right? No need to pronounce every time client device or client computer or server computer, like this. Just a client and server, that's enough. So what is a client here, or what is a server here? As we know that for suppose if I started my laptop and I just typed www.facebook.com by opening some browser. We know web browsers, like we have so many popular web browsers: Chrome, Firefox, Internet Explorer. We have so many, right? Right. So I just open my browser in my laptop and then I type www.facebook.com or something else. Right. Now what happens is my laptop becomes a client here. My laptop becomes a client device here. And through internet, right, I'm going to connect to the Facebook server system or Facebook server, right? And from there I'm going to get the responses. I'm going to get the web pages which was related to my Facebook homepage or my messages or whatever it may be, whatever the content I'm having in my Facebook page, right? I'm going to get all those details here. Now look at this scenario once again, right? If you apply that scenario to this diagram, right? So from client, I'm sending a request to the server. From server, I'm getting some response. Right. The client will send a request and will receive a response. And for all these things, the client needs a web browser. The web browser is mandatory here. Right. So if you want to send a request and if you want to receive a response, you need a web browser and it is mandatory. That's okay, fine. Right. Next, what was the request here? Right. So whatever the website name I am typing, www.facebook.com. In generally, we call it as a website address, but technically we can call it as a URL, Uniform Resource Locator. You can call that website address as a URL also. Whatever you type as a website address that makes a request, that itself is a request, right? And that request will be forwarded to the server using your internet. Definitely you need an internet connection. And your server receives a request and process that accordingly and prepares the response, right? And that response will be sent back to the client. In the client machine also, the response will be displayed in the web browser. Whatever the content you see or whatever the content that will be displayed in a web browser is going to be called as a web page. Web page. So generally to display the web pages or display the content in a web browser, we have a technology called as HTML. Right? So your response will be in the form of HTML, right? HTML is used to display the content. That's okay, right? Your response will be comes along with HTML tags so that it will be displayed on your web browser or client's web browser. Am I clear? So that's how the request and response communication is going to be happens in the web. So whenever you talk about a web means there should be a client server communication. If there is a client server communication means there is a request and response process, right? So please remember these points. I think it was not moving. Right. Whenever we receive the content or response from the servers, as a continuation to the previous slide content, so we were discussing that. So whenever I send a request from my client end and I'm going to get a response from the server end, right? That's okay, right? So generally the content whatever I receive or the response whatever I receive from the server is going to be in two types. One can be a static response, other can be a dynamic response, You simply call this as a web page also, static web page or dynamic web pages. So the response can be of two types, static and dynamic web pages. If you are working with a simple websites, right? Generally, the response you are going to receive is going to be a static page. So how you can say that it is going to be a static response or a static web page? Nothing but frequently the content is not going to be changes. Static in the sense, most of the time ideal, or most of the time it is going to be fixed. It is not going to be changes. That can be treated as a static generally. So when I'm communicating or when I'm working with a website, right, generally I'm going to receive the static responses, static web pages. The best example is like, for suppose if I open a Wikipedia page for a particular topic, most probably the content is not going to be changes once it was done, right? So for a long time it remains same. Very rarely you can see the changes. Or else you can see some home pages. Whenever I type www.google.com, right, whatever I'm going to get the response, whatever you can see, there's a search bar followed by Google search button below that. The pattern will not be changes. You will have the same thing every time, everywhere. You can call them as a static web page or static response, right? But whenever you work with some web applications, you can, right? So web application is not at all different. It is also a website, nothing else in it. A web application can also be treated as a website, right? But generally it will generate the dynamic web pages or dynamic responses. Nothing but every time that will be changes. So for suppose if I open my Gmail account, right? If I open my Gmail account right now, I'm going to have the messages. After 1 hour, if I open my same Gmail account, I'm going to have new updates. Nothing but the content was changing. Even my Facebook also, right? So every time I'm going to have the different content. Nothing but the content will be changes from time to time, location. Even sometime it will be location to location also changes it, right? The person to person, the content will be changes dynamically, right? Those things will be called as a dynamic web pages, right? You can see new terminologies here: a website and web application. So generally, a website will provides static responses, whereas a web application is also a website, but it provides dynamic web pages, right? So please observe this. Right. In continuation to that, we are going to see a protocol called as hypertext transfer protocol. What is this and why we need this? Maybe we are not going to see the complete information about this HTTP protocol shortcut, HTTP protocol detail right now itself, but we need some introduction here. Right. Let me explain you this with a diagrammatic representation. Look at this. At the client end, now you can see the diagram here. At the client end, I'm using the web browser, some Chrome or something else, and I'm going to type some URL or website address, right? And that will be sent as a request to the web server. The web server will receive and process that, and it sends back the response to my web browser. That's okay. Request and response. Now you can see a new terminologies or new way of presenting the request and response. Those requests and responses are going to be called as HTTP request and HTTP response. Why? What is a HTTP here? First thing is, right. I will start with the last term in the expansion of HTTP, protocol. What is a protocol in general? A protocol is a stack of rules and regulations, a set of rules and regulations. And what were the rules and regulations here, and for what purpose we use the rules and regulations here in our context, right? I need to exchange some data between client and server. Are you getting? So I'm repeating once again. In this context, I need to exchange or transfer some data or text between client and server, right? While transferring the text in between client and server, what were the protocols I need to use? What were the rules and regulations I need to use? It's not possible directly without having any rules and regulations to exchange or to transfer data between two different ends, right? There is some rules and regulations. So I will come with a small example why we need some set of rules and predefined set of rules and regulations here. Just imagine I would like to conduct a AJP session today, right? And for this, we were following some predefined set of rules and regulations, and without those predefined set of rules and regulations, we may not complete our session successfully. Why? Because let's see this. One rule is we have to meet at 3 o'clock. This is the first rule. And we were using a platform called as MS Teams. This is second rule. And the third rule is I'm using a communication language English so that you all can understand, right? So this is the third rule I'm using. So by default, I'm using some set of rules and regulations to communicate with you or to exchange some data with you so that only our session is going to be successful. Otherwise, right, if you are not following some fixed time, or if you are not following some platform like MS Teams, or if we were not following some communication language rule, right? So the things are not going to be done effectively. And here also, your client is a device which is having a different configuration, hardware and software or operating systems kind of things. And your server is located at some remote location, right? And it will be works on a different platform with a different configuration, with a different operating systems, with a completely different environment. So we need to have a data transfer between two different devices via internet. That also plays a very important role, right? Through a medium, they need to exchange the data. And without having some certain rules and regulations, the message data transfer is not going to be effective here, right? So that's why international standards, HTTP is an international standard protocol to exchange the data between a client and server. So that's why whenever you type any website address, www.facebook.com, automatically that will be changed to HTTP or HTTPS followed by your URL name. Nothing but whatever we do communication over internet, those communication will follow a protocol called as hypertext transfer protocol. And I can simply say that over the internet to exchange the data, the protocol we are going to use is hypertext transfer protocol. Am I clear? Right? So, and with this, we have some other points also to discuss. You can see in this slide, HTTP is a protocol that I think whatever you can see in the slide, those things were already discussed, we shared with you. Just see the points here. HTTP is a protocol that clients and servers use on the web to communicate. That's okay. HTTP is a stateless protocol. We'll come back to this point, stateless protocol, later. Maybe you can't understand right now. HTTP supports only one request per connection. Look at that, the rule, right? Once the connection is established between client and server, The HTTP supports only one request, nothing but the multiplexing of different requests from different clients. That cannot be done. This means that with HTTP, the clients connect to the server to send one request and then disconnects. This mechanism allows more users to connect to a given server over a period of time. The client sends HTTP requests and the server answers with an HTML page to the client using HTTP. Both request and response both are going to be HTTP requests and HTTP responses. Am I clear? And the response will be in the form of a HTML tags, right? Yes, that's an important thing. So whatever the things we discussed so far, if you summarize them, so we were started with a web where we'll have a client and server devices, and they use the client will use the web browser and the server will receive the request from the client and response and response with the answers, right? And after that they may use the they may use the HTTP protocol to send these requests and responses, right? Now we have a small introduction to these servlets here, right? Maybe the complete chapter talks about servlets here, but here we have a small introduction, right? What is a servlets here? A servlets is a Java technology. The first thing is used to create web applications. Please remember the terminology. Please recap the terminology. Web application. A web application works in a client-server environment where you will receive the dynamic responses, right? Please remember that. Servlet technologies uses the Java language to create web applications, and where the servlets are going to be there, right? Servlets are going to be at the server end. I'm repeating once again. Servlets are going to be at server end to build dynamic web pages. Am I clear? I'm repeating once again. A servlet is a basic Java technology. Basically, it's a Java technology. Whenever I write a servlet program, it just looks like a Java program, nothing else in class, right? Within the class, I have some set of methods, right? So the things will be in the same way: inheritance, polymorphism, whatever there, everything will be there. Importing statements, whatever there. The servlets are Java technologies. That's okay, right? The way we write the servlet code or servlet classes is servlet code will be in web server, nothing but server side. In the client and server environment, the servlets are going to be at server end, and the purpose of these servlets are to generate the dynamic web pages. Why we need dynamic web pages? When we need some dynamic web pages, right? Now recap the initial topics. The client will send a request to the server. Server will receive that and it prepares a response to that. That response can be a static response or else a dynamic response. If it is a static response, I don't need any other technology help, right? But if it is a dynamic, if it is a dynamic response, if the request needs some dynamic response, then I need some additional program help, and that program is going to be the servlet program here, right? So please remember this: servlets are going to be at the server end, and they are used to prepare the dynamic responses for the client's requests, right? Now look at this diagrammatic representation, how this detailed communication is going to be how happens with the presence of servlets. So at the client end, I'm having a web browser and the client is sending some request to the server, right? And now the server was dividing into two parts. One is the middle part, I'm calling it as a web server, right? That was the entry point to the server actually. The whole thing, the middle part followed by the right hand portion completely frames a server actually, right? So now we were detailing the server here. This is going to be the entry point. Web server is going to be the entry point here. So initially my request will be sent to the web server. The web server will check the request and the request will be forwarded to the corresponding servlets. Now the servlet program, servlet is a Java program, nothing else in it. The servlet program will be executed, right? And the purpose of this program, servlet program, is to prepare a response for this request, which was sent by the client. Like for suppose, if it is requesting for a file, right? So now it will, the servlet will run and opens the file and reads the content, the file content, right? So whatever the request it may be, right? The servlet will execute and it prepares the response for that, right? Then it prepares a dynamic web page with the help of HTML technology or HTML. It prepares that dynamic page, and that response will be sent back to the web server initially, and from there the response will be reached to the web browser. So your web server plays a very, very important role here, and it is an interface between your servlet and your web browser, right? So the servlets are required whenever your request needs some dynamic response or dynamic web pages, right? Right. Before moving on to this, just I would like to discuss a few points related to what is meant by a front-end or back-end technologies, and very briefly. Here, front-end in the sense the technologies are the languages, programming languages are the tools, whatever it may be. You can call anything. The technologies are the tools or whatever softwares I use at the client end is going to be called as a front end here. And the technologies I use at the server end is going to be called as a back end. Look at this. Already you are introduced with this HTML as part of our AJP also, right? So HTML is used to prepare or design the web pages, right? So you have the CSS also. Later you are going to learn this, right? And JavaScript is there, jQuery is there, AngularJS is there. All these are going to be used for us, right? To design or to work at the client end. So client end lo man work chesukodaniki, right? It's going to be useful to us. Once a client request pampichin tarvata server ki, right? So to prepare the dynamic responses, right? We have all these technologies. You can make use of PHP. You can make use of Java technologies. You can make use of Python. This one is Node.js actually. This represents Node.js. And there is a SQL also. I will talk about SQL later. SQL is also required here, but these mandatorily these. Where the servlet falls here. Servlet is a Java technology. That's why we were saying it as part of Java only, right? Servlets. You can make use of any one of these. No need to no need to use all these technologies to prepare a response for a client request. Any one of these, right? So it can be PHP or Java, Python, Node.js. Anything can be used to prepare the dynamic pages, right? So now we were learning one of the Java technology called as servlets, right? Yes, that's a difference, front end and back end, right? Now coming to the SQL part, nothing but I think you already started learning this DBMS right now, right? So why you need this SQL or DBMS, all these things, right? Databases. Yes, so many web applications are there. There you need to work with the database. Yes or no? That's quite common. Without database, 90% web applications will not be there. Websites, what I can say is websites simply. Without databases, 90% websites will not be there. For everything, I need a database. For suppose if I want to work with a binder, yes, I need to store some data, student marks, student attendance, faculty information. Where I'm going to store? I can't store those data in a file. I'm going to store in a database. If I'm working with any other thing, banking application, I'm opening Dhanlakshmi Bank, working with the Dhanlakshmi Bank net banking, where my account details are going to be stored. It needs some database, right? You can imagine any website, 90% websites are having, they need the database. Right, what happens is, I will just go back to a little bit. Now what happens is, where this DBMS will be at the server end only. Generally, it is going to be placed in a separate system actually, not in the server actually. It will be placed in a separate system. Now what happens is, so when I send a request from web browser, from client, right, it will be sent to the web server. From web server, it will be sent to the servlet. If it needs any database, now this servlet will connect with the database, which will be there in generally in some remote machines. Look at this, the number of different devices we are connecting. Client is a separate device. The server is a separate device. Web server followed by servlet. The server is a separate device, and that will communicate with the database server. The database server is a separate device. You will have a 3-tier architecture, right? And it happens mostly. It's quite common. It is kind of happens in the real world applications. Now my servlet will communicate with the database, and from the database I will get some details. It may be bank details, or it can be some student data, or it can be anything else, right? That's a secondary. So like this, we'll have the communication. Right. That's about a basic introduction to servlets. Before servlets also we have a technology, it's just an introduction. Before servlets, there is another technology. Servlets is not an advanced technology. So today we are having so many technologies like PHP, Python, right? Ruby, Perl. We were using so many things. To say frankly, servlets is going to be one of the older technology. It's not a new, right? Before that, we have another technology called a CGI, Common Gateway Interface. We can say it as Common Gateway Interface. CGI is a methodology. It's not a programming language or a tool. The CGIs can be written in any programming language. It can be C or Python, C++, anything. It can be written in anything. What was the problem with the CGI, and that why we were moving to servlets, right? When comparing to the CGI, servlets are little bit advanced. There is a problem with the CGI. Let me explain with a clear picture. Look at this, how the CGI works when a request comes. When a request comes to a CGI, CGI will prepare a separate shells, CGI shells for each and every request. Shell in the sense, it's a operating system environment. You're talking about Unix shell, Windows shell, right? It's an operating system environment for each and every request, right? So the separate operating system environment shell is going to be created, and the request is going to be handled. and what basis that CGA shell is going to be created based on the request. So for suppose, if a request one comes from a Windows environment, I'm talking about platform, client operating system. If request one comes from a client who are using Windows operating system, now that request will be handled at the CGA in Windows CGA shell only. If the request 2 comes from a Unix operating system client, and that request is going to be handled in the Unix CGA shell only. So for each and every request type, I'm going to have a separate shell, operating system shell, and there my program is going to be runs, and I'm going to have the response for that request. Creating a CGA shell is not going to be the simplest task. You can see the bottom block, the processor load, how the processor is going to be loaded when they are working with the CGAs. It's so simple. Look at this. When you open multiple applications in your mobile phone, what happens? Even though we are working with the latest and the smartphones, if you open multiple applications, like in one app is going to be something PUBG, other one is going to be something new advanced one, if we open multiple things, what happens? Automatically it will be, the working is going to be a little bit slow. And here also in the same way, it overloads, right? So that's a problem we were having. Whereas when we were working with the servlets, they see how it will be handled. Whenever it receives a request, just it creates a thread. Why? Because as I'm working with a Java, servlets are Java, and those were purely platform independent. I think you got it. Java is platform independent, right? So whenever I receive a request, just I create a thread. I think you know thread creation, multi-threading in Java. That's the thing. The concept will comes into the picture here, right? Just it will create a thread, and just it starts working. Whenever it receives another request, it creates another thread. It can create any number of threads. Creating threads are going to be very, very easy rather than creating processors separately. Creating a process makes a huge burden on the system, but creating threads is going to be so much easy. And you are going to learn these things. I think you already experienced with the multi-threading, but the detail you are going to experience these things operating system subject also, right? So we have this flexibility with the servlets. That's why we prefer the servlets rather than the CGI, right? Just you can see some these same points, whatever we discussed so far about CGI and servlets, just these were prepared here. You can, if you see these few points here, simply you can say that these going to be Java related buzzwords only: platform independent, object oriented. Look at that, multi-threading. All these are the buzzwords of Java. Servlets is a Java technology. That's why same buzzwords are repeating here. Nothing else in it here, right? That's the information here, right? So CGA versus servlets, and in the next coming, right? We'll stop here, but in the next coming, I will introduce a technology, a tool called as Apache Tomcat. So Apache Tomcat is going to be one of the tool we need to install our servlets or to work with our servlets, right? So I will share you what was that Apache Tomcat was exactly, and how it supports our servlets and all these things, right? So we'll see these things in the next coming sessions, right? So we'll stop here, right? So
Ashok sir.
sir,
Question announcement, sir.
sir చెప్పండి సార్.
నా కౌన్సిలింగ్ స్టూడెంట్స్ ఎవరైతే ఉన్నారో
కౌన్సిలింగ్ ఛానల్ ఉంది కదా, అందులో ఇమీడియట్గా జాయిన్ అవ్వండి సార్ క్లాస్ అయిపోగానే. ఆఫ్టర్ సార్ టేకింగ్ ద అటెండెన్స్, క్లాస్ ఎండ్ అవ్వగానే నా క్లాస్లో ఆ ఛానల్లో మీట్లో వచ్చి జాయిన్ అవ్వండి. ఓకేనా? సో థ్యాంక్ యూ సార్.
Okay, sir. Right. So for today, that was the topic. Just it covers about introduction to web, client server, HTTP, dynamic versus static web pages, and what is a servlets, where actually it resides and works, right? And before that, what was the technology we have? So just this small concepts we just covered so far, right? Any doubts here, you can ask me, or you can type in the chat. If you have any doubts, you can unmute and talk. Otherwise, you can type in the chat also. No issues. Are you able to follow? Are you comfortable? Can you respond for that with yes, or if you have any issues? Yes. That's good. Nice. Good. Right. As I shared already, right? Tomorrow session will covers about the Tomcat. What is a Tomcat? Why we need that, and how it is going to be installed into our system, and then how we can write the servlets, right? The simple servlets and all these things. Completely, I can say it as an environment setup in our systems, right? So we'll see these things in the tomorrow session, right? So that's all for today's session, right? Hope, right? I'm clear and you are comfortable and you are able to understand, right? And have a good day. Stay home, stay safe. You can leave now.